Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. In Pakistan, security forces have rescued 5 laborers in an intelligence-based operation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The military's media wing says they were part of a group of 16 abducted by terrorists in Kurram district last month. It says 10 were released the next day, while 1 body was also recovered. Indian forces have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The Kashmir youths were targeted during an operation in Srinagar's Dunmar area. Occupation forces have imposed a complete communications blackout in the area. Pakistan says the Afghan situation and unresolved disputes are the key challenges to peace and stability in Asia. Addressing the conference on Central and South Asian regional connectivity in Tashkent, Prime Minister Imran Khan said the huge potential of cooperation remains untapped because of these regional disputes. Khan said Islamabad's foremost priority is stability in Afghanistan as it directly affects Pakistan. The death toll from floods in eastern Germany has risen to 81. Authorities say more than 1,000 people are missing in the Neuenaar-Arweiler region. At least 11 have died in Belgium, with the Netherlands and France are also affected. Brazil has reported more than 1,500 COVID-19 deaths and over 50,000 infections in the past 24 hours. Pakistan has logged over 2,300 new infections and 31 new deaths overnight. Globally, the coronavirus caseload has surpassed 188.8 million, while the death toll is over 4 million. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. Pakistan says the Afghan situation and unresolved disputes are the key challenges to peace and stability in Asia. Prime Minister Imran Khan made these remarks while addressing the conference on Central and South Asian regional connectivity in Tashkent.
Khan said the huge potential of cooperation remains untapped because of these regional disputes. He said Islamabad's foremost priority is stability in Afghanistan as it directly affects Pakistan. The Prime Minister expressed disappointment over the allegations against Pakistan from the Afghan side. He said to blame Pakistan for what is happening in Afghanistan is extremely unfair. The Prime Minister categorically stated that Pakistan is a partner in peace. He said Pakistan has suffered 70,000 casualties and a huge economic loss due to the unrest in Afghanistan. He said 3 million Afghan refugees have been living in Pakistan for decades. The Prime Minister, along with his delegation, later met Afghan President Ashraf Ghani on the sidelines of the conference. All this comes the day before Pakistan is due to host a 3-day Afghan peace conference.
President Ashraf Ghani mentioned Pakistan's negative role in this conflict going on in Afghanistan. President Ghani, let me just say that the country that is going to be most affected by turmoil in Afghanistan is Pakistan. Pakistan suffered 70,000 people dead, 70,000 casualties in the last 15 years. The last thing Pakistan wants is more conflict. Our economy is finally recovering from one of the most difficult phases which we've been through. And I repeat, the last thing we want is turbulence in Afghanistan. I can assure you that no country has tried harder to get Taliban on the dialogue table than Pakistan. We have made every effort, short of taking military action against Taliban in Pakistan, we have made every effort to get them on the dialogue table and to have a peaceful settlement there. To blame Pakistan for what is going on in Afghanistan, I feel, is extremely unfair. I came to Kabul. Why would I come to Kabul if I was not interested in peace? The whole idea was that you should have looked upon Pakistan as a partner in peace. And I feel really disappointed that we have been blamed for what is going on in Afghanistan. What is happening in Afghanistan is...
For more on this, we are joined by Shehzad Chaudhry, former ambassador. Sir, thank you for joining us. Sir, how heavily does the stream of regional connectivity in South Asia depend on the peace and stability of Afghanistan?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tipping point in Afghanistan at this time, strategically speaking, because a very long term of the foreign forces in Afghanistan is just about coming to an end. And that status quo, which had been imposed upon the region because of the foreign forces, is, of course, now changing. So that creates more opportunities and potential and promise for the region to turn the corner. Within Afghanistan, of course, the possibility of Afghans finding a new normal for themselves, creating a more better consensus for themselves, and laying out a future prospect which will hopefully give them peace as well as stability within Afghanistan, which will then, of course, begin to impact the region around. The region, of course, in the meanwhile, has also moved on. The introduction of CPEC in Pakistan, the BRI initiative, the fact that the Central Asian states are more keen to now open up and find routes to further trade or developing trade in the region as well as across the world, and of course the possibility of Iran now coming out of a tight corner that the U.S. had placed it under because of heavy sanctions. If the U.S. and Iran can come to some agreement in terms of the nuclear issue, so all these are the possibilities which have created that tipping moment for the entire region, and therefore this flurry of activity that you see at the level of leaderships in the region is essential and important. It indicates to what all could happen and promise. So, of course, Afghanistan is the central piece there, but around that, a lot more is happening, which could decide favorably in terms of the future prospect of the region.
Sir, do you believe there is a possibility of suitable peace and stability in Afghanistan anytime soon, considering the number of spoilers?
Yeah, anytime soon is a difficult part there, because yes, as you mentioned, the number of spoilers. The region has been embroiled in a war for a very long time, and a lack of a central grid within Afghanistan meant that a lot of spoilers found foothold there, toeholds there. We popularly mention India there because of its presence in a huge way in Afghanistan, in the turmoil of Afghanistan, to try and impose a second front on Pakistan, which they had done in the last 20 years or so, 15 years. Now that became very evident, and of course India now openly says that Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa regions are the ones that are targeted by not only India, but of course the groups that are sponsored by India, especially Balochistan. And so therefore, yeah, that's been a hotbed of intrigue, of insurgency, of trouble for the region, especially Pakistan. Iran has been very threatened by how things have developed in Afghanistan. Central Asia has been, of course, not very settled, exactly for similar reasons. And so therefore, yes, that is true, that there are a number of spoilers, and it will take a while for any force that tends to dominate Afghanistan to overcome these hurdles and these groups and warlords that exist there. But hopefully, one prays and hopes, and one sees the possibility of more of a negotiated solution to the whole thing within Afghanistan, so that They do not have to enter a civil war proper to avoid, getting mired into another long war within Afghanistan. So therefore, if there can be a political consensus and a political way forward within Afghanistan, that will ease off a lot of pressure. And if there is a central authority that gets determined in Afghanistan or gets in place in Afghanistan, that will then hopefully enable a more stable or a relatively more stable Afghanistan, so that the rest of the world can find peace, and especially the region, which can then begin to develop a more longer-lasting relationship with Afghanistan.
Sir, Pakistan was one of the first countries in the region that talked about the importance of regional connectivity. Other than the Afghan issue, what are the key initiatives needed to enhance the trade and transit conduits of the region?
Yeah, that's a very essential and an important point. Sometimes that's something that we miss entirely when we talk of the just one paradigm, that is a security paradigm. I think the security paradigm of Afghanistan, while is the key to the whole thing, but it will need more than the security leverages to be able to resolve it. And what that really means is that you want to solve the security predicament of Afghanistan and the region. But the way to that solution is through the economic imperative. And the economic imperative lies in how China wants to develop in the region. It has its own, loop, his own branches of the BRI and the CPEC, etc., and its own relationship with Kazakhstan and then Kyrgyzstan, etc. So they have their linkages, but here they are enabling their own trade as well as the region to get interconnected with all these connectivities that they're trying to create. So I think that is the key. If we can somehow tailor the direction of this entire process of trying to find a solution, a regional solution, into a more economic model, which was possibly talked of yesterday between the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the President of Uzbekistan, into seeing how Iran, Turkey, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and then the larger China, Russia connectivity can also feed into this. I think this will then force the nations to look at the security paradigm in a different context. So my theory has generally been that the way out of the security paradigm is through the key of economic connectivity and economic prospects, and that is where the leaders must focus, because Afghanistan too will need to find its own means of sustenance, economic and financial, and therefore it will need to also have an economy developed around what goes around for trade in the region and in between the rest of the countries. I think that is what is going to help them try and find better stability and security.
Shahzad Chaudhry, thank you for talking to Indus News. And now we're moving on. Pakistan says it will continue to play its reconciliatory role for peace in Afghanistan. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi held a meeting with U.S. envoy to Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, on the sidelines of the South Asian Conference in Tashkent. Qureshi said Afghans have to decide the future of their country. He said peace in Kabul is essential for the promotion of regional connectivity and economic development. Islamabad has rejected Kabul's allegations that the Pakistan Air Force threatened its Afghan counterpart to support the Taliban. In a statement, the Foreign Office said Pakistan's Air Force never communicated with the Afghan Air Force. The Foreign Office said such statements undermine Islamabad's sincere efforts for the Afghan peace process. It said Pakistan acknowledges the Afghan government's right to undertake actions on its sovereign territory. The statement added that Islamabad took necessary measures within its territory to safeguard its troops and population. The Taliban have also rejected Kabul's claims, saying the Afghans can protect the Spin-Buldak border crossing. Earlier, Vice President Amrullah Saleh said Pakistan's Air Force warned Afghan forces against dislodging the Taliban from the area. He also accused Pakistan of providing close air support to the Afghan Taliban in certain areas. For more on Pakistan's stance on the issue, we have been joined by our correspondent in Islamabad, Ms. Manahil Ahmed. Menahil Amrullah Saleh has a history of levelling baseless and outrageous accusations against Pakistan in the past as well. Does Islamabad intend to take up this recent set of allegations with the Afghan government directly?
The Foreign Office has released a statement in which it denied all allegations made against Pakistan by the Vice President of Afghanistan. Meanwhile, addressing a conference in Uzbekistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan did express his disappointment over such statements, while President Ashraf Ghani was also present at the conference. He reminded President Ashraf Ghani that how Pakistan was one of the countries who tried the hardest to bring Taliban to the table to start the peace dialogue. He also expressed disappointment and said it was extremely unfair to put blame on Pakistan for turbulence in Afghanistan. He said that Pakistan was one of the most affected countries due to terrorism and due to the instability in Afghanistan, and said that Pakistan is a partner in peace and should be considered one rather than being blamed for turbulence in Afghanistan.
What effect would such allegations have on the nature of relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan and the efforts for peace?
Well, yes, this isn't the first time that Afghan officials have made statements against Pakistan. The Foreign Office has said that such statements undermine Pakistan's efforts to support the Afghan peace process. Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said that right now all energies and all efforts should be directed towards a comprehensive political settlement rather than such statements. He said that these spoilers should not be encouraged, and it does not only affect the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan, but it also affects the Afghan peace process, which is at a very crucial stage right now.
Menahil Ahmed, thank you for updating us, and now we are moving on. In Pakistan, security forces have rescued 5 laborers in an intelligence-based operation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The military's media wing says they were part of a group of 16 abducted by terrorists in Kurram district last month. It says 10 were released the next day, while 1 body was also recovered. On Tuesday, 2 soldiers were martyred in an exchange of fire with terrorists. But security forces continued the pursuit of the terrorists. The media wing said the army is working hard to ensure the security of innocent civilians. Indian forces have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The Kashmir youths were targeted during an operation in Srinagar's Darman area. Occupation forces have imposed a complete communications blackout in the area. The troops have carried out hundreds of extrajudicial murders during their so-called cordon and search operations. Rights groups say Indian forces have martyred at least 400 Kashmiris since August 2019. The United States and Germany have failed to settle a dispute over Russia's Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline. U.S. President Joe Biden and German Chancellor Angela Merkel met at the White House in Washington. In a briefing, they agreed that Moscow must not be allowed to use energy as a weapon to coerce its neighbors. Merkel said Russia could face EU sanctions if it violated its agreement to continue shipping gas through Ukraine. Biden said both leaders agreed to continue to support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. They also agreed to collaborate to accelerate moves to tackle the climate crisis in emerging economies. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says Beijing and Moscow should jointly combat the stigmatization of the COVID-19 pandemic. Wang made these remarks during a meeting with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Wang said the 2 countries should work together to oppose the politicization of virus origin tracking. Meanwhile, Lavrov wrote an article on the 20th anniversary of Russia and China's Treaty on Good Neighborliness. He said the military cooperation between the 2 is not against any third state. Lavrov said Russia and China do not accept the policy of regime changes, double standards, and unilateral sanctions. The death toll from floods in eastern Germany has risen to 81. Authorities say more than 1,000 people are missing in the Neuenahr-Arweiler region. At least 11 have died in Belgium after record rainfall caused rivers to break their banks. Torrential rains have also troubled the Netherlands and France, prompting mass evacuations. Luxembourg has set up a crisis panel to respond to emergencies triggered by heavy rains. In Switzerland, Lake Lucerne reached the highest level 5 and will flood if the water rises just by 13 more centimeters. Forecasts suggest that more heavy rains are expected across much of the region today. Brazil has reported more than 1,500 COVID-19 deaths and over 50,000 infections in the past 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus caseload has surpassed 188.8 million, while the death toll is over 4 million. More in this report.
While new waves of COVID-19 continue to emerge in several countries, governments make it clear easing restrictions is directly proportional to vaccines. Canada says it may permit fully vaccinated travelers into the country by early September if the current trend in vaccination rate and public health conditions continue. Over in Europe, England is removing most restrictions from the 19th of July, saying a rapid rollout of vaccines has largely broken the link between infections and serious illness or death. But the United Kingdom's chief medical officer says people should approach the end of curbs with caution. Spain's Barcelona is to impose a night curfew again amid rising cases. Spain's 14-day infection rate has surpassed 500 per 100,000 people for the first time since mid-February. The situation continues to worsen elsewhere too. The World Health Organization says Africa recorded a 40% rise in deaths this week.
As this surge sweeps across Africa, we're witnessing the brutal cost in lives lost. Deaths have climbed steeply for the past 5 weeks, jumping 40% in the past week. This is a clear warning. Our hospitals are at a breaking point. In all, 153,000 people have sadly died.
South Korea says tighter limits on private gatherings may be needed as treatment centers fill up, prompting calls for more people to be allowed to receive care at home. Thailand has reported a daily record of 9,692 cases as authorities struggle to tackle the country's biggest wave of infection so far. The Philippines has detected its first locally acquired case of the more infectious Delta variant. Indonesia is struggling to cope with a devastating wave driven by the Delta strain, which has left hospitals overflowing. Many infected people are unable to get a hospital bed and simply die at home. In such times, about 35 volunteers in Bogor, south of Jakarta, recover the bodies of people that have died from COVID-19 while isolating at home.
On the first day, we only received a call for one death, maybe because the hotline number was not widely known then. On the second day, there were 3 deaths, but today, nearly a week after the group was formed, there are 7. So the condition is gradually worsening. The condition in Bogor city is worrying.
The Delta variant has picked up pace in Australia, and officials have urged people to obey lockdown measures that cover around 40% of the country's population. Meanwhile, Abu Dhabi has announced a partial lockdown and new entry requirements in the Emirates starting 19th of July. Saudi Arabia has arrested more than 120 people suspected of supplying or procuring fraudulent vaccine and test certificates 2 days before a tightly controlled Hajj amid some of the strictest rules in the world.
Pakistan has reported 31 deaths from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the nationwide tally of fatalities have reached 22,720. The ministry says the virus infected more than 2,300 people overnight. It says there are over 4,300 active cases and nearly 2,400 of them are critical. The country's caseload is approaching 984,000. More than 917,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. In India, at least 4 people have died after falling into a well in central Madhya Pradesh state's Vidisha district. Locals say some 40 villagers fell into the well while attempting to rescue a child. Eyewitnesses said the collective weight of the people led to the collapsing of the well. Officials say 20 people have been rescued while some 16 remain missing. They say a search and a rescue operation is underway. Turkey says it has killed 7 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the Tel Rifat region in northern Syria. The Defense Ministry said the militants attacked Turkish base within the Operation Euphrates Shield Zone. They said 3 of the neutralized terrorists were from the group's main base in Mount Kandil in northern Iraq. The ministry added the other 4 terrorists were neutralized in strikes on their positions in Sheikh Isa and Dakna. Ankara holds a fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year conflict. U.S. authorities are struggling to suppress a huge wildfire that displaced roughly 2,000 residents in southern Oregon. It is the largest among dozens of blazes raging across the drought-stricken western United States.
The bootleg fire has now charred more than 227,000 acres of desecrated timber and brush. More than 1,700 personnel, aided by 12 helicopters, increased containment lines to 7% from 5%. However, Incident Commander Joe Hessel says the blaze will continue to expand. No serious injuries have been linked to the bootleg fire. Officials say it has destroyed at least 21 homes and 54 other structures. Nearly 2,000 homes are threatened. The bootleg fire ranks easily as the largest of at least 10 active wildfires burning across the Pacific Northwest. According to state figures, it is the 7th largest on record in Oregon since 1900.
In Canada, an Indigenous nation has called on the government to release residential school attendance records to help identify unmarked graves. This comes as specialists presented the full report on the discovery of 215 unmarked graves near the Kamloops Indian Residential School. The nation said they expect more graves to be found as the search continues. The ground surveying teams have identified potential grave sites after searching 2 acres near the school. More than 160 acres still require investigations. Chief Rizan Kasmir said the finding prompted fresh commitments from the First Nation to continue work at the site.
I look forward to a fulsome conversation where we can finalize the details of the federal government providing the needed supports as well as access to our student records, and also to continue to shed light on our missing children that are buried in our care.
Kamloops Residential School in British Columbia was the largest in the country. Opened under a Roman Catholic administration in 1890. The school had as many as 500 students until its closure in 1978. And now moving on, in Britain, the inventor of a jet suit that lets its wearer fly like Iron Man has unveiled his newest electric-powered suit. More in this report.
Richard Browning, founder of Gravity Industries, says switching from jet fuel to an electric-powered suit will push the limits of what is possible. He says the suit has enough power to run a number of houses.
Suit has enough power to run a small street of houses. It is phenomenal how much energy you need in a small form factor to get a human off the ground, and it really just brings home how much energy you have in gasoline or diesel or those fuels. So we're getting there. It'll only ever get better.
It has previously been tested by the paramedics in England's remote regions to get them to people in distress faster. The company has also demonstrated its suits to the Royal Marines to test how they can assist in maritime boarding operations.
Yeah, so military and search and rescue, they are new applications, but no, they're very real. We've done enough exercises with both of those groups now in a variety of countries to prove that there's actually a really powerful role for the equipment. So yeah, watch this space.
Gravity Industries was launched in March 2017 with founder Browning demonstrating his jet suit all over the world. The suit can hit speeds of over 128 kilometers per hour and is capable of reaching an altitude of 12,000 feet.
Shares in the Asia-Pacific markets are trading mixed as investors trade cautiously amid an alarming rise in COVID-19 cases. Japan's Nikkei 225 has dipped close to 1%, with shares in mainland China shedding over 0.5%. Seoul's Kospi has also dropped marginally. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Hang Seng has gained nearly 0.5%. Australia's ASX 200 is trading flat. And now it's time to have a look at the weather update.
Thank you. We're going to start with Abu Dhabi, where it is expected to get extremely hot with temperatures rising to 43 degrees Celsius. While in Amsterdam, the weather is pleasantly cloudy with temperatures at 22 degrees Celsius. If we head to Ankara, the weather is mostly sunny with temperatures at 35 degrees Celsius. Now moving to under Auckland, the clouds will get in the way of the sun, but the temperature is chilly at 17 degrees Celsius. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, the clouds will be overhead. Temperatures there will be around 33 degrees Celsius. While in Beijing, there are going to be clouds in the forecast with temperatures at 30 degrees Celsius. While in Beirut will experience mostly sunny weather with temperatures at 31 degrees Celsius. Berliners will experience a bit of cloudy weather with temperatures at 28 degrees Celsius. Now heading to Cairo, the hot sun will be excruciating with 39 degrees Celsius as the temperature. Down in Canberra, the winter rain is keeping things chilly at 10 degrees Celsius. In Islamabad, the sun is out with temperatures rising to 36 degrees Celsius. While in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 33 degrees Celsius with some partial sun. That's all for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Nala, for the weather updates. Now it's time to close. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.